Great to be with you today. I'm Peter deSilva. I am a CMT patient. I'm a father of a CMT daughter, brother to a CMT family. It seems to go everywhere in our family. We definitely drew the short straw when it came to the 50-50 idea about CMT. We're way over indexed on CMT in our family. I'll just say this before I get into a chat with Cara. I got diagnosed 50 years ago. I'm 63. I was diagnosed at 13 and have had lots of surgeries and lots of other things to try and stabilize the situation. And my doctor told me at Boston Children's Hospital, he said, yeah, don't worry, this is not great, but it's not going to kill you, and it's going to be a bit of a minor inconvenience throughout your life. And I'm thinking minor inconvenience with a cast up to here. But anyways, but he said, don't worry. He said, there'll be a cure in the not too distant future. So here I am, here we are, 50 years later. 50 years later, and we don't have a cure. We don't even have a treatment just yet. But let me tell you what I've heard in the last 48 hours is the best news I've heard in 50 years. We are closer than ever. We're going to get this done together as a community. And I don't know what year this convention is going to be a celebratory one, but I think it's in the next decade. I really do. And we will continue to persist until we get there. Now, what we want to do, Cara and I, I'm going to let Cara introduce herself here in just a second, is really just have a conversation. So we've basically invited you into our living room to have a conversation about the process of going through a human trial. As that was acknowledged, I've never been through a human trial. Cara has. And so you're going to get a chance to learn from her, from a real patient, as opposed to, no disrespect to our researcher friends, a bunch of slides that talk about the process. She's lived the process. So she'll be able to talk to you about how that process went, the challenges, the difficulties, the rewards, and all the other pieces of that. So this is really just meant to be a discussion. Cara went through the NMD trial recently, and as a consequence of that, she's got some great insights to share with all of you. So Cara, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Sure. So for those I haven't met, my name is Cara Leath, and I have CMT type 1B. I was diagnosed at age 20, so it's been about 11 years. And I recently completed, as Peter mentioned, the NMD 670 trial. I was in the trial from June through late July, I would say. And I've been super involved in research ever since getting diagnosed, whether it was natural history studies. I was part of developing the biomarkers, the motion sensors, and obviously that trend has continued. So super excited to be here and share the experience with you all.
Where do you live and where did you grow up? Give us the whole portfolio.
Okay. Grew up in Westchester County, in New York, and then went to college at Binghamton University, where I met my lovely husband sitting back there. And then currently, we live in the New York capital region, right around the Albany and Troy area. And professionally, I am a senior product manager for a tech company making an adaptive learning platform for software engineers.
Pretty impressive, right? Okay, so tell us first and foremost, how did you find out about the trial? And then what drew you to the trial? Like, what interested you to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I have been super committed to joining any trial that would have me ever since being diagnosed. And for the NMD one, I believe it was spring of 2024 was when I first learned about it. And I believe it was from a CMTA email, actually, that announced the trial. And I personally was thrilled. I felt very validated earlier. I believe it was Dr. Riley said that type 1B is kind of the forgotten stepchild of the type 1s. There have been no phase 2s, no phase 3s, anything that I could try in the last 11 years. So when I saw that this was inclusive of all type 1s and type 2s, I was absolutely thrilled. And then I believe it was the CMTRF actually, about a month or two later, held a webinar to talk about the drug. And during that webinar, they shared that folks who are daily AFO wearers are going to be excluded. So, as you might imagine, I immediately counted myself out. I closed my laptop, cried about it a little bit, and was like, all right, this isn't my time. We're going to move on with this. And a few months later, I have a very good friend, Chris, out in Ohio. We're both very big into research, and he went to go qualify. And he got knocked out for being too strong. And I was like, well, sorry for you, but good for you. And when he was talking through the process, I was like, okay, well, you got knocked out for being too strong. So was there a dorsiflexion minimum? Because mine is a flat 0. And he said there wasn't. And when I had him send me his copy of the informed consent, I was like, I really think there's a chance that maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I could qualify. And unlike we just heard in the last session, I didn't go through my neurologist. I tend to be a pretty independent, stubborn streak. So I emailed 3 trial sites and asked, like, hey, I heard about my friend's experience. I think there's a chance that I could qualify, and wanted to see if anyone wanted to talk to me. So I first talked to my usual center of excellence in Rochester, New York, and we had about a 30-minute screening call where it seemed like the stars were aligning and this actually might work out. And right as I was getting excited, they shared that at that time, there was a cap of 2 people with type 1 per site, and they were full. Again, not one to take anything lying down. I reached out to both the Boston site and the Columbia University site, and a wonderful woman named Rebecca from Boston got back to me and said they did have space for type 1s. So this became maybe a 30 email chain where we really defined that the rule was actually, if I was willing to put my AFOs aside for the trial, then if all else worked out, I could participate. And on the list of things I was willing to do, putting my AFOs aside was certainly one of the milder ones. So I agreed, and I got screened, I believe, in the final week of May.
So what's the first lesson in sort of the patient role in this trial? Persistence, that's the word I was thinking about, and self-advocacy, right? When somebody says no, push back. Ask why. Don't take no for an answer. See if you can't find another way to get into the trial in that case, and good for you for being your own best self-advocate. It's true in healthcare generally, right? You really have to advocate for your own health. Okay, so now you've said you wanted in. They finally said yes.
Yep.
What happened?
Yeah, so in the middle of a tropical storm in May, I drove to Boston late at night and went through the screening day. And it's really a lot of iterative steps to find out if you're going to qualify, because again, there was like this 30-minute phone screening going through a lot of questions. And then arriving on site, there were a lot of additional questions and physical measures to make sure that you fall right in the sweet spot that they're looking for in that phase. In talking to some of the clinical staff, there had been people who made it to clinic day and gotten knocked out for going too fast on their 6-minute walk test, which immediately horrified me. I was like, I was going to try to go fast as possible. And then similarly, people who went too slow. And then in addition to all the in-clinic measures, you then enter a little bit of a waiting phase because they take a lot of blood work, and that all needed to pass muster as well. So in the time that I went, I believe I was the 6th person who had come to the MGH site to be screened, and I was only the 2nd person to pass every single measure. So in the middle of the work week, I got an email from Rebecca saying all systems are go, and then we have immediately scheduled the next 6 weeks of travel.
So talk about that. This was logistically challenging for you. Just talk about lifestyle and how it changed your lifestyle during this period.
Yeah, it was admittedly intense. So as I mentioned, I live in upstate New York. So when traffic is kind, and as we know in Boston, that's often not the case. I'm about a 2-hour and 50-minute drive. It was often closer to 3.5 and 4, depending on traffic. And it is a short but very intense travel schedule. So for 6 weeks, I had to go to clinic once a week. And those visits were anywhere from, I would say the shortest was maybe an hour to some that are more like half a day. But given how far I had to drive, obviously these were full day endeavors for me. So I am very privileged to be in a position where I can make this work, because I work for a company that's fully remote. I have unlimited PTO. And beyond all of that, I have a manager who's extremely supportive. And even though this happened to fall when we were building our first net new revenue generating product in the 5 years of the company, and I had to lead it, he still said, absolutely, you can take a day off 6 weeks in a row just to go do this. So often, because it was such a hectic time at work, while I was home, I'd be working until 9 p.m. to cram things in. Then on Wednesday nights, usually I came in on Thursdays, I would leave right after 5 and drive through the night to get to Boston. I would come into clinic. Some visits were in the morning, some were in the afternoon, and then I would drive back home. I did turn some of these into fun long weekends into Boston, but it was a heavy travel schedule. And I, again, really want to emphasize that I know that it is a very privileged position to be in to be able to do that.
So talk more about the specifics. So now you're in the trial, you're traveling. What did they do? They just give you a drug and send you back home and monitor you, or what happened during that period?
Great question. So they do a lot with the logistics to make it as easy for you as possible. So for example, since I lived as far as I did from the site, NMD covered a hotel any weeks I wanted one. Some weeks I did choose to do a day trip just because of other things I had scheduled. Some I did overnight. They also provide a $75 food stipend for each time you visit. The times that I came with my husband, that comfortably covered both of us. The times I came myself, I was going home with coffee cakes, cookies, lots of different treats. I was like, if you're taking my blood, I'm taking coffee cake. And then they also covered travel expenses. So if I had been taking a train or something, they would have covered the ticket. In my case, I was driving, so they covered the mileage up to 300 miles, which would equate to $187.50 every round trip. And then in terms of what happens, they just take the drug and send you on your way. So, yes and no. So in terms of the day-to-day, I was sent home with a bottle of tablets. They were just chalky little tablets, and I was told to take them 2 times a day, about 6 hours apart optimally. And I had to just write on a piece of paper logging the times I took my doses and literally anything else that happened to me. Like if I, took Advil for a headache, I had to write that down just in case. Or like, even if I didn't take another medication, if it was like, I feel lightheaded, like whatever it was, they were like, write everything down. And then as I said, I was coming in once a week, and you will never be more closely medically monitored in your life as while you are in a clinical trial. While the exact measures changed a little bit week to week, certain things were weekly, some were not. The baseline was they were always doing at least 1 round of lab work, measuring things I didn't even know you could measure. They were doing EKGs to check on my heart. We were doing functional tests and neurological assessments and all sorts of things to ensure that I was safe throughout, in addition to how effective the drug could be. And I'm very happy to say that in my experience, I had nothing concerning show up on any of my lab work, any of the assessments, and I did not feel like I was suffering any ill side effects. So we were very carefully monitored, all to find nothing, thankfully, in the bad side of things.
And I assume this was a double-blind test, so
Yes.
you did not know if you had the drug or the placebo.
Yes, and to this day, no one officially knows, but I'm sure we'll talk about it. I certainly have my assumptions.
Right. So talk about that, because it sounds like you had a good experience, as good as one can, going through the trial, and maybe a positive outcome.
Yes. Okay. So obviously, huge caveat as I begin all of this, as we just shared.
We don't know.
We don't know officially. No one knows because it's double blind. The blind won't be broken until the end of this year. But from what I believe I was on the drug, and I believe that it works. So to kind of talk you through it, I will take you through, what I felt day to day as a patient, and then also the bits I saw show up clinically. So in terms of the mechanism of action being fast, they're not kidding. I had suspicions day 1, and I was completely convinced by day 2. I think the highest level general way to describe it was everything just felt about 20% easier. Like I have, 0 dorsiflexion. It's not like I was magically, walking completely normally now, but all of these little things throughout the day, like I felt more steady when I was standing. I was able to, pinch zippers better when I was opening and closing bags. I was more comfortable walking around the house because I don't usually use my AFOs. And when I'm not wearing them, my hips sway a lot. And I found they did that a lot less. But I think really what stood out to me was just, I remember it in a series of moments, really. So the first suspicion I had was I go to spin classes every week, and I, am able to stand while holding onto the bike. But usually if they say, run, I'm like, cute, no. And I remember night 1, I always try as best I can. And all of a sudden I realized my legs were moving much faster and I wasn't feeling off balance. And so that was the first moment where I was like, okay, I think something's different. Then the next day was a super emotional one. So I went for my usual morning walk. I have this Garmin watch on all the time. I turned on my walk, and usually my mile time is 25 to 25 and a half minutes. And I looked down at my watch when it buzzed for the 1 mile mark, and I had not been trying to power walk or anything. And I realized it said 20 minutes and 45 seconds. And I freaked out. I immediately was completely mind blown. And I had, dropped off a library book and gone for a walk there. went to gas up my car to come home. And this sounds so small, but I think a lot of us in the room know how these little things add up. I like slid my credit card out of my wallet. And after I got back in, something that I had been having trouble with over the couple months prior was sliding my ID out of the ID slot. And I just had this moment of like, maybe I should give it a try. Because usually it took me multiple tries, like 30 seconds, and I slid it out in one shot. I just started crying. I was like, this is something. So my husband could probably attest. I drove right home. He was in the middle of a meeting on the back porch. I threw the door open, was like, watch me take my wallet. And like, the thing is, he'd seen me do it so many times, I didn't have to explain it. He immediately knew. And so we're just crying on the back porch about a wallet, hugging in the middle of the workday. And so that's when it really started to sink in. And it continued to show up in all these little moments where I wasn't looking for it. Like I would go to yoga classes, and a week prior to the drug, in like a low lunge with one knee on the floor and one foot on the floor, they said, put your hands up. And I was wobbling all over the week prior. They asked me to do it the week following, and I was rock steady. And then another big one is, I'm sure many of us with CMT know, sometimes walking isn't even so bad, but ask us to stand still and it's torture. And we went to a Renaissance fair that weekend, and I noticed that despite how hot and humid it was, we were on a farm with uneven ground. I realized I wasn't turning to my friends and asking for quote unquote off-feet time, like they're always used to me asking for when we're out and about all day. So it really just started adding up in my personal life, all these different things between just everything feeling a bit easier in these very tangible moments. And then carrying into the clinical measures, because I want to acknowledge, like, obviously the placebo effect is real, right? That's why we design these trials this way, because we want to be so confident that the drug is working. And so in terms of the clinical measures, as we heard, the primary endpoint for this trial is the 6-minute walk test. Before the drug, my baseline visit and my screening visit, I was in the low to mid 1,300 feet in 6 minutes. I was at 1,587 on my last drug visit. And while all of this sounds great, right? Like up until that, I was still like, this could, be psychosomatic. Maybe I'm just more confident, and so I feel more balanced, or like I, am power walking and I'm not realizing it because I really want to will this to be true. But to me, there was really one defining moment in the clinic where I was like, I cannot think of a psychosomatic explanation for this. And Dr. Reza, who's sitting right up there, was wonderful. And at my first visit where we were doing the baseline measures, I opted to do, I believe it's called electromyography, where they stick the needle into your muscle and ask you to flex it. Yeah. And so they specifically want you to test this muscle right here that's responsible for dorsiflexion. As you may remember, I have 0. So that first visit, I was literally like every muscle from glute to foot, just tensing my whole body, trying so hard to get a reading. He had to stick and re-stick me like in 8 different spots. And after about 20 to 30 minutes, we're like, okay, we got some readings, we didn't get enough, but it's something. And on that last day, the last day that theoretically I was on the drug, he stuck me once, and it was like the little crackles lit up the screen. And within 1 stick and in 10 minutes, we had enough readings because so many more motor neurons were being picked up on the test. And to me, that was that moment where I was like, I cannot fathom how I could mind over matter new neurons into existing. So that was when I really became convinced that, as much as I felt like I knew it in my heart that it was happening, I could not think of another way to explain that being true.
Wow. That's what it's all about. It's what it's all about. It's changing lives. It's improving lives, and yours clearly improved. But it ended.
It did.
The trial ended. So talk about that and what's happened since the trial.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into all of it, I, knew that was a risk, right? Like I accepted as price of admission that there was a chance that I would turn my life upside down, do all this travel for 6 weeks, and I could be in the placebo. Or I was equally afraid of the outcome I had, where, I would get a taste of something that worked and then know it had to be taken away. And of course that was hard. It was undeniably hard, but a few different things. One, I just prepared for it. Like I planned a very fun long weekend in Boston after the final day of the trial, went for an awesome tasting dinner the night it ended, went to New England Aquarium the next day, like really tried to make that soft landing of reminding myself that, life is going to go on in the gap between now and the next phase if everything goes well. Also, I'm very lucky to have so many close friends that live nearby. So similarly, they are obviously super excited to hear about this at every step. And I told them I was dreading the end. And so they, again, were all there to help out and distract me, go to trivia and do fun things afterwards. And then also, I think at the beginning, part of what I wondered was, would it be like in terms of it being hard to experience it and have it go away, would that be worse than having not done it at all? And absolutely not. Like having done it, there is this level of hope and optimism. And I'd always tried to hold on to some. I think we all do. That's why we're here. But to have felt it in my bones and know that it was real, like whenever it gets hard, I can always think back and be like, it's waiting out there. It'll be back one day. And, I'm not all that old, but being in my 30s a year is already not such a long time. So fingers crossed that all goes well and the next phase comes.
Has your body changed physically since coming off the drug?
Yeah, I mean, basically it has a very short half-life, which means it exits your body quickly. And so basically the effects wore off within a day or so. And I want to be clear that that is not a failure. That is the known pharmacokinetics of the drug. That was expected. That's not a failure. That was just what was going to happen. So certainly I've suffered no ill effects. I've had no problems as a result of being in the trial. And basically it's back to business as usual. But that there definitely wasn't this big post-trial crash or anything. It was just kind of a coast down to baseline. But again, with that half-life being so short, even when I was on the drug, it was very interesting to watch throughout the day that I would wake up more wobbly, take my first dose, be a lot more steady throughout the day. And by the time I was going to bed, I was getting the wobbles back again. So it's like a very interesting up and down throughout the day, even when you're on it because of how short that half-life is.
Dosing question, right? It's
yeah.
Definitely a dosing question. So would you recommend others participate in human clinical trials?
Absolutely. I think that, we are our way out of this. They could test this on 1 million rats and it will never, ever come to trial unless hundreds and thousands of us are willing to raise our hands and say, I will endure the sacrifice. I will take the risk. I will do the travel. I will do whatever it takes. And again, I had a really positive experience. The clinical staff are so kind. I really looked forward to my visits every week. And again, it is our only way out. And there are so many of us who want to be involved. And I saw firsthand when I was in Boston, there are so many hands that go up and at every part of the funnel, more get knocked out for various reasons. So if you ever are interested, raise your hand because there are going to be so many folks who want to participate who for 1,000 really valid reasons will not be able to. So we all have to show up every time we can so that each time they can get the critical mass they need.
That's awesome. We have a couple minutes left and we're glad to open it to questions. If anybody has any questions from the floor for Cara or for me, for that matter. Any questions? Come on, you've got one of the heroes of the CMT clinical trials in front of you. Over there, yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So can you just talk a little bit more about what it was like kind of living in AFOs and knowing you can rely on them and everyone say like, I guess you said you work remote, but people being familiar with how you get around with AFOs and everything. And then that time where you weren't, so you couldn't wear them the whole trial. Mm-hmm. And just maybe talk a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that was easily one of the biggest trade-offs. I am a huge lover of my AFOs and believe that they absolutely make my life bigger and better in every way. And I think, like you mentioned, the fact that I work remotely really helped. Like, I don't have a commute. So, my physical activity was choose your own adventure. I still chose to go for walks and whatnot, but, shorter, slower, and things like that. And yeah, I think ultimately, like I said, I knew it was a trade-off. I knew it was a sacrifice, but I was able to kind of build my life around it because, again, I'm very lucky to work fully remotely. So everything I chose to do, like I had a lot of agency over it and could make those choices.
Other questions? Okay. Well, not seeing any. Cara, thank you. Thank you so much, not just for telling your story, but for participating in this. It takes a lot of courage. I mean, we're sort of all on the vanguard of some very, very new things. And here's what I know for sure. If we don't have people like you and people like you who have the courage to walk this new journey with us together, we're just not going to get there. Someone said yesterday, and I won't get this exactly right, but the best human trial candidate is a human, right? It's not a rat or it's not a mouse or whatever it might be. And so ultimately this has to be tried in the human body, which is not the same as a rodent. So that all having been said, I'm just grateful that you did it for us, for everybody in the community. I hope to goodness that this will continue to move forward. This particular therapy will move forward and that everyone can enjoy the benefits that you enjoyed for a short period of time.
Absolutely.
Everybody give it up for Cara.